Welcome back, I'm the Redstone Warper here, and today is a very special day. It's not every day that you get to have the opportunity to be on the cutting edge of discovery. So drop a like on the video and maybe even subscribe, because this is definitely not the last you're gonna see of wireless redstone. When I saw this on April Fool's Day, I knew it was a joke. I was like, come on, I'm not that naive. So to find out a couple days later that it was true, and that it actually was real, that wireless redstone does actually work, I was completely ecstatic. I jumped immediately into my testing world and had to test it. So you can imagine my disappointment when I found out that it wasn't reliable, and that there were things like chunk loading and items coming into view that could affect it for both multiplayer and single player to create false triggers. And so that's why I decided that I would try and find a way to make these reliable and come up with systems so that we can figure out ways to ignore this extra input so that we can actually send clean signals to the receiver. So before we get too much into it, if you have not seen this already, go to Two Names channel and look at his videos. He does a really good job of describing exactly how it works. Now, before I start going on to some of the modifications I've made and some different changes to things, I just wanted to quickly go over the base contraption here. Just ignore this extra little bit of redstone stuff. This is some part of my experimenting that I'll describe in just a little bit. But the main part that we're looking at right now is this redstone lamp, which tells us if we've detected a signal. Basically, the way this machine works is by dispensing items one right after each other in this weird voodoo contraption of a machine, we can actually detect items when they are dispensed in the same exact game tick as the item over here. We do this by first we dispense these two items. They look like they're being dispensed at the same time, but one is actually just barely before the other because of the way repeaters work and scheduling the game events. So because we have a comparator here, technically this item gets shot out first, followed by this one basically at the same time. By doing this and synchronizing this up to a clock, we can then send another item which gets dispensed at the same time as one of these, which is detected by this magical device over here and sent as an output. Again, watch Two Names video on how all of that works, because it still really confuses me. Before I move on to some other concepts and some ideas, as well as some theories, I want to show you just how easy it is to use this in survival. So I have actually built a wireless receiver super far away. I think it was like 4,000 blocks away, and I'm going to show you just how easy it is to actually teleport yourself by using this wireless redstone, because all it takes to do that is 1 block, 2 droppers, 17 repeaters, a daylight sensor, 2 items you don't care about, and knowing whatever pattern of your receiver it is. So with this I've done is I've just laid out all the repeaters. There are 8 repeaters that you need to set, and so these are the ticks. So 4 1-tick repeaters and 4 2-tick repeaters in that order. Direction is also important. So these ones are in line with this detector, which means they're paired. If the detector is going in the opposite direction, you need to go the opposite direction of the detector. So it's also important to know what direction your detector is facing. So what we're going to do here is place down our daylight sensor just so that we know where it is. You're going to take a repeater output from both sides. This one is just going to head into a block. And then what you're going to want to do is make sure these repeaters are the same. So we had 4 1-tick repeaters that we're going to put here, and then we're going to do 1, 2, 3, 4 repeaters here, and these last 4 are all going to be on 2 ticks. These need to be exactly this so that they are in line with the detector that we want to trigger. So if we set up like this, then we can set our droppers here, and we can go ahead and put our junk item in each one. Then to teleport yourself or activate whatever wireless redstone is on the other side, oh, not updated, let me put these back in here. This can just be whatever item you want. And of course you could just have this built somewhere, but my brain automatically wants to say is, all right, let's say I'm on an anarchy server and I want to teleport to my base. Maybe I have an alt account or a friend loading it for me, and I want to be able to control when I teleport myself to my base. So I can build the transmitter, place down the daylight sensor, wait a few seconds, and bam, we get teleported all the way over here. Pressing F3, you can see that we've traveled over 4,000 blocks. Now, of course, in survival, you would need to build a chunk loader. I just did the force load command, which if you didn't know, you can add chunks to the force load, which will basically make sure they're always loaded, kind of like the spawn chunks. But of course, in survival, you could just build a chunk loader, and there's plenty of designs out there that you can use. So, by using daylight sensors, we can sync the game ticks of both of these, the clock and this transmitter. So by flicking this lever and causing this update to this daylight sensor, we can actually get a signal sent wirelessly. And if you don't believe me, we can go under the ground here and you can see that there is nothing underground that's connecting these secretly. It's completely wireless. So by using the daylight sensors to sync these two machines up across large distances, we can actually transmit a signal way over to here. And by using this repeater chain, you can create any combination of repeaters here and create different transmitters. So you could have all sorts of transmitters on different frequencies, for lack of a better term, and send more data throughout your server and have independent transmitters for different things. The way this machine is set up currently, there's over like 4,096 different combinations that you can use just in this base machine here. Although I've experimented a little bit with making more combinations as well as faster clock, but those are still in highly developmental stages. So, on to the issues with this device. One, on single player, loading in different items and stuff like this, when items come into render distance, it can cause a false trigger. I have had varying luck trying to force that to happen. Sometimes I can get it to happen, sometimes it doesn't. It's random. And that's why it's very hard to counteract. Now, I can show you here that chunk loading will affect it. If I log out of the game and then come back into it, you can see that right as we come up here, it will get triggered. Wait just a second. Okay, so it didn't get triggered this time, but sometimes it does. Try it again here. Alright, there we go. So as you can see here, loading back into the game actually caused this machine to send an output, and actually now you can see that we have kind of broken it a little bit, because as I move this way, we probably loaded some entities over there, causing a second trigger after loading. I've noticed that that's kind of when you're most likely to actually cause this to happen, is right when you load in the game and start loading things. That's when these false triggers happen. So to combat this, what I've done is I've added this little system where if it's a short enough pulse, it will cut off the signal and it will not activate whatever your machine is here. So right here, I just have a basic ender pearl stasis chamber. So we can set our ender pearl here. And so if you notice, when those false triggers happen, because of this system, it didn't activate the ender pearl stasis chamber. So as you can see, we can use our transmitter here to send a signal to this machine, but because it is just a single pulse, it gets cut off and it doesn't actually activate the stasis chamber. By doing two of these at the same, one really close after another, we actually lengthen the pulse instead of it completely going out, so that this will unlock and teleport me here. So in this way we can make it reliable to only activate when we send a signal, because of chunk loading or an entity coming in the process or some of these random events only happen once. So the single trigger will not actually activate the machine, while if you do this double trigger, like with this antenna here, you can actually get it to activate the machine. So this is the first way that I discovered that we can actually make this more reliable by only activating it if we get this double trigger system. And of course, you could also make it a little bit more complex, have maybe a pattern of these pulsing that has to match up correctly with the receiver, stuff like that, so that you can essentially make sure that it's impossible for a random event to trigger the machine. Another thing you can do in terms of interpearl stasis chambers is another design by No name is this player detector. This will detect if the player is online and in the dimension of this cat. The way this works basically is when you're online, the cat is standing up, and therefore this chest is not locked. You can open the chest, and therefore the comparator can read in it. When a player logs out, the cat will actually sit down, which will lock the chest, and since it's being updated by this hopper underneath, this comparator will stop giving an output, meaning that this repeater line will lock this so that if this tries to get triggered while the player is not online, it won't actually teleport. This is just a addition to make it harder to accidentally trigger the interpearl stasis chamber. Of course, in order for this to be receiving, it has to be loaded, which means you will need to build a chunk loader or have it in the spawn chunks for this to be able to work. As you can see here, we have a couple different transmitters here. Obviously, this is a single antenna design, so currently these two actually will only work during the daytime because they are set at night mode and will detect the block being pushed over them. This is important because the daylight sensor here is actually what's syncing this repeater line to this one over here so that we can actually detect the item being spit out by this dropper over here. This design over here is based off of the wireless redstone design where we just send signals downwards by placing a block on top. And so we basically do the same thing here where we have these two comparators in night mode and then subtracting the signal we get from this one. So no matter if it's daytime or nighttime, we can properly send the signals. And so this is the design you're going to want to use so that it will work at night and during the day. Unfortunately, the biggest issue with this, and a problem that I will explain later and I'm already attempting to solve, is this does not work in the end. Because if you didn't know, daylight sensors do not work at all in the end. And we'll come back to this a little bit later in the video. Now, some other issues you might run into is sometimes the clocks will not get synced correctly. This can happen a lot of times, like if I were to turn off this clock using this lever here and turn it on, there will be times when this will not actually send a signal properly. Sometimes it will not actually work, and to fix this, you can literally just wait. Because it updates based off of the daylight sensor, as soon as it hits nighttime, it will actually update the clock and it will work just as fine. So if you run into a situation where it's not working properly, you can just wait a little bit of time until it gets to night again. The clock will update and then it will work just fine after that. I've been doing a lot of testing with this device, trying to figure out exactly what breaks it, what doesn't, so that we can try to eliminate as many of the factors that cause this machine to glitch out so that we can have reliable connections. So the next thing I tried, besides sending a double signal, was to actually send a signal using this clock. And let's just turn this off so we don't have to worry about any interference, because I can't remember which set of these has the same clock speed. One thing to note, you cannot have any receiver that's at the same speed because it will cause it to detect each other instead of your actual signal. So that's a very important thing to note, is they all have to have their own unique frequency. You can have as many transmitters as you want, but you can only have one receiver, which is unfortunately the biggest downside of this wireless redstone system. So here I experimented with if I have them in two different directions, because they can only detect if the transmitter is in the same direction, to see if maybe different directions would have different interference at different times, so that you would have to activate both of them at the same time in order to get an output. Unfortunately, the issue here is that they both still get interfered with at the same time, so this ultimately didn't really work that well. So I built this system over here, and this is where I have a much cleaner cutoff design here, where we're still using the two-sided system, and this just, the more we build these, the more antenna-like these actually start looking. We'll go ahead and start both of these clocks, and then by using our transmitter design, we can, See, we're now picking up interference from these guys, so I forgot to turn these off. Coming back over here, you can see that we've stopped detecting those clocks over there. And if we retransmit, you can see that both of these detected the same... Okay, well, alright, so see, you're already starting to see some of the issues that we have. So we can do time set night and set this to night. You can see that the clocks kind of reset over here. And we'll go time set day to bring it back. Now that these clocks are synchronized again, we can try and retransmit, and then both of these will update, and it will fire up our thing because we activated both of these transceivers at the same time. The next design is actually one that I derived from real-life Wi-Fi chips, and this is really what gets me wanting to try to build a Wi-Fi card for computers in Minecraft. Now, this is kind of slow, and so in order to build our Wi-Fi chips, it's going to be pretty slow, and so the way I'm probably going to do it is have each line of bits for an 8-bit computer have its own transmitter, so that we can try to send as much data as quickly as possible. So one of the ways that modern computers transfer information is they will send the information to another transceiver, and then that will send it back to confirm, yes, I got your message. So I've kind of mimicked this using these machines over here. If I send a message, you can see that the light over here turns off, saying that, alright, we've sent the message, but we haven't received it back. Now, if this worked correctly, yep, it did. So this got the message, and then it activated this sender over here, which is tuned to this receiver's frequency, and sent the message back, which then turned off the transmitter over here, and turned on this light saying, yes, the message was sent successfully. So then the next iteration for this would actually be to, if this doesn't turn on within a certain amount of time, try to resend the message. So we can push this button here. You can see we're transmitting. You can see it was received. This one receives the signal, and it resets the system, ready to send the next message. So this is a way that we can actually make it so that we can confirm that a message was sent to another location. Obviously, the next part of this is to actually start implementing file transfer protocols and stuff like that for actually building a Wi-Fi card that could talk to another computer. Of course, we aren't able to do things exactly like a real computer would do them because we are limited by how fast. But that is going to be some of the upcoming videos for actually trying to build working Wi-Fi cards, because I think that's wicked. And we will probably start with just sending a simple message to other people's bases. Now, towards the beginning of the video, I mentioned that there were some problems when it comes to the end. Because daylight sensors do not work at all in the end, this system doesn't work. And this is where I started doing some research to try to find a way around it. And because they're useless, we don't have anything we can use to sync the clocks together to activate things at the same time. But I've already started experimenting with ways to get around this. So the first way that I tried was literally just spamming this. And so I kind of figured out that if you spam this at just the right time, like I just did there, we can actually activate the machine. So technically, it is still possible to send a signal through the end, like to an end base, to teleport yourself there, but it's going to be super irreliable. You're not going to be able to transmit data effectively because you're just essentially just relying on randomly getting it right, which you can see we were able to do a couple of times there. Now, the next thing I thought about was like the only way before this to do wireless redstone was to detect when somebody was online. And so I've been trying here in this absolute mess of redstone to basically sync two clocks together from a distance. So this is just here to tell us that it's synced or not. It's like right now it's synced. But let's say I just destroy this redstone and place it back. There we go. Now you can see that these clocks are not synced. So the goal was to use a player getting online to actually sync these clocks. Here I'm just simulating this by actually changing the owner of this cat so that it will stand up. So we change the owner to me, which simulates me coming online on the server. This activates both of our clocks and makes it so that they're synced again. This will happen when you leave or join, as long as both areas are loaded. So in this way, we can at least start to try to sync the clocks together. And so what I had tried to do was then sync the clocks and then use our transmitter over here to try to transmit on this frequency, but I've had no luck actually getting this to reliably be able to sync the clocks over a distance and teleport you. It's probably something to do with the exact specific game ticks. I've tried a lot of different things, and as you can see, it's still very much a mess. But I think this is where we can continue improving on this technology and possibly create another way that we can sync things together. So I guess this is my challenge to you, is we've already kind of determined that using the same clock as what's in there and using the cat to recognize when we log in or when we enter the end to try to sync the two clocks together, maybe there is a way that we can actually make this so that it will actually be able to transmit effectively. Because if we could do that, then we should be able to actually effectively transmit data in the end by syncing the clock and then basically making sure to only transmit if in the correct timings. Editor Man here. One thing I forgot to mention was the original idea before trying to use cat player detectors to sync the clocks was to actually try to detect an autosave in order to be able to sync the clocks up to a game event that happens everywhere at the same time. But unfortunately, in the newest versions of the game, it's no longer possible to detect an autosave. Well, I think that's about all for today, guys. I know this has been a very different video from what I've normally done on the channel, and so I hope you guys enjoyed. If you did, go ahead and leave a like, and if you want to receive further updates of some progress using wireless redstone, go ahead and subscribe and turn on the bell so that you can get notified when I make the next breakthrough with wireless redstone technology. And of course, go subscribe to No to Name. He did an amazing job inventing this machine, and it's by itself. If you ignore my mess of redstone over here and come look at just it by itself right here, it's a very clean device, very compact, and very useful. Thanks for watching.